Welcome to the Women of Ihsan podcast. I'm your host, Sophia, and this is an invitation to join me and our amazing guests to find inspiration and insights into your own journey to Ihsan. If you ever feel overwhelmed or confused along the way, I'm also here to support you so you can tackle your challenges with confidence and make progress towards this lofty goal. To find out more about my work, check the episode description and make sure to subscribe.
والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر.
Bismillah wa salat wa salam ala Rasulillah. Welcome to a new episode of the Women of Ihsan podcast. Today, I have the great pleasure to have a fellow podcast host with me, none other than Haleema Saheed. Haleema is a journalist and the creator of Hijabi Culture, a podcast that celebrates hijab-wearing women. Haleema started her career as a community reporter in West Yorkshire, and she's recently moved to London for a job in broadcast journalism. She hopes to create positive impact on journalism and shares stories of underrepresented communities. Once again, thank you so much for accepting my invitation. Welcome and salam alaikum, Haleema.
Wa alaikum salam, and thank you so much for having me.
You're most welcome, and I'm very excited to have you and be able to find out more about who you are. Please tell us about yourself, maybe share a bit about your background.
Yeah, so my name's Haleema, and I am a journalist, and it's something that I've always wanted to do. I've been in the industry for just over 2.5 years now, having graduated from university in 2021 and out of the pandemic. And I started as a community reporter. So I was hired to get to know my local community and share their stories. And it was a big part, it was something that wasn't being done in journalism. We were just hearing stories that were just being generated, press releases, but this was my opportunity to kind of delve into these communities, find out what makes them click, triggers them, and the problems that they were challenging and overcoming. So I did a lot of work on that, and I managed to make some really fantastic contacts and share some really incredible stories about young people in Bradford who are going above and beyond to tackle mental health issues within the community. I reported on an honor killing, and I used who I was and what I knew to help change that and help change the narrative that was surrounding a lot of the stories that we were covering. I was one of the only Muslim people in the newsroom, and when I left, I was the only person of my background, so Pakistani or Muslim, in that room. So it was quite challenging being a person of color in what was a very densely populated area of ethnic minorities and BAME people, but the only voice in the newsroom that was getting those opinions across and sharing their stories. So yeah, that was a challenge in itself, but it was something that I was so proud of, being able to champion people from my own background and share their stories. And then further on from that, I am the host of Hijabi Culture. It's a podcast that celebrates hijab wearing women, and it just shows that we're more than our hijab, and we're not limited in any way, and we can go above and beyond. And one of the key things that we're focusing on right now in this series, we just launched season 2, is that it's okay to be successful and want to be successful. Because sometimes, we limit ourselves. We think, oh, we can't do these things because we wear a hijab, or how will we be seen in these kind of spaces? But it's okay for us to want that, and for us to go and overcome those barriers and break the glass ceiling and just keep going, because we're the only ones that are keeping ourselves from achieving these amazing goals.
Amazing to hear about you. Can you share with us any personal story, maybe?
Yeah, so when I started Hijabi Culture, a lot of people won't know this, but I started it in 2019 as a university project. And we were asked to create a website as part of a module, and it had to be something that we cared about, something that we were passionate about. And we were at home because university was all from home at this point. And I was saying to my sister, what do I do? Like, I'm not passionate about anything. I don't really care about like the topics, the like local impact on climate change and gender equality and really like litter picking and stuff like this. And I just thought that's not something that I'm that passionate about. And I thought, let's bring it closer to home. And it was at this point that I had been talking to quite a few people about what it was like being a journalist or studying to become a journalist and being the only person like you in that room. And I thought, if I'm here alone doing this course by myself in this room, imagine how many other people there are scattered across the UK that are doing the exact same thing, that they're finding themselves as the only hijabi in that space. And we started off as a website and I interviewed so many people. But because my university was in the north of England, I had to kind of create like a barrier around it. So I was only interviewing people from the north of England, hijab wearing women, about their stories. And I didn't even have to venture that far from my doorstep to find these amazing women. Oh, there was a weightlifter, there was an author, there was a woman who was running online a whole modest fitness campaign. And it was just amazing that not even that far from me, there were so many people creating such a big impact, and we didn't hear their stories. We didn't know what they were doing. And I just thought that that's the point, that is hijabi culture, and that's the stories that I want to share. And I thought about giving up on it so many times. I just thought that it's not gaining momentum. People aren't listening to it. People aren't clicking on the website. But every time I tried to say, okay, we're done with it, it's chapter ending, I've come across a new person and a new story. And I just think, no, that's the person, because maybe this one's going to be the next big episode, because I just think that we deserve to champion each other, and we deserve to have platforms that champion people who look like us. And we get to tell our own fabulous stories about everything that we've done, we've overcome. And sometimes being a hijab wearing woman is really lonely and it's really isolating. And I felt it so many times that when we were in a classroom and we were talking about 9/11 and photojournalism, and it was the picture of aeroplane going into the Twin Towers. And I felt so isolated in that moment in that classroom because I was the only hijab wearing person. And it just felt like either I claim the narrative and I put my hand up and I say something, or I just quiver into my shell and just expect everybody else to think that, oh, she's part of them, like she's a terrorist, she doesn't know anything. And in that moment, I did put my hand up and I said to the lecturer and I said to all these students that 9/11 was horrific and it was so many people lost their lives and it's changed the world. But that was the day that the life of people like me and people who look like me changed forever as well, because we were no longer normal people. We were always going to be seen as terrorists, or we were the face of terror in that moment. And it's taken a long time, but that image still hasn't shifted. And now in the world that we're living in and with what's going on in Palestine, we're getting that anti-Muslim trope all over again. And it's now that it's important to champion Muslim voices and say that we're normal people, but we are also extraordinary people.
Definitely. I love this. Mashallah. It's amazing to see the courage that you had on that day to raise your hand and speak up and try to reclaim your narrative, mashallah. So I'm always really in awe of young people like yourself, and that's why I was also interested in knowing more about yourself. And the concept of our podcast here is also to give some representation to Muslim women, and I think we can never have enough of that until the narrative changes, because unfortunately, even within our communities, hijab wearing women are still considered less or not as educated as the non-hijab wearing women, subhanallah. So this is something we have to work really, really hard together to make this narrative a thing of the past, because it's not true. And even though I know, like, we contributed to that, it didn't just appear from vacuum. But I think at this point in time, we should know better. And because a woman wears hijab, it doesn't mean that she's not educated or she's oppressed. Someone has forced her to do that, and so on and so forth, the usual things we hear. So when I see younger sisters like yourselves who really own their Muslim identity and are proud and also try to promote even. I'm so happy to see that, because I feel like this is the way forward for us. Because my generation, we didn't have these role models, but now as time goes on, we will have more and more. And again, the purpose of your podcast or my podcast is to highlight these personalities, these amazing women who are achieving so much, like any other woman at the end of the day. So it has nothing to do with whether you wear a hijab or not. On the contrary, our faith, and this is where I want you to go, in the direction I want to go to, is what is helping us overcome our challenges. Could you share how your faith helps you overcome any challenges that you had in the past, or maybe still having, or how it's just helping you have more peace in your life?
Yeah, I think faith has been such a big part of my life from such a young age. I don't know how it works in Germany, but in the UK we go to maktab, and then we go to from madrasa from the age of like 5, 6, and then you kind of go. We can go up until like whenever. So I did my basic, so learning Quran and Arabic, and just learning about Islam in the core basics from the age of 5 to 11. And then when I was 11, I moved on to do an Alimiya course. So it was 7 years of intense learning. So learning about Islamic theology, and it was, when you talk about it, we said we learned about the hadith of the Prophet. We covered the 6 major hadith kitabs, but it was so much more than that, because we got to be in an Islamic environment for 7 years for 3 hours every single day. And you gain so much more from that than just the books that you read. It's about maintaining routines. It's about knowing that your life has purpose outside of school and everything else. Because it was the opportunity to sit down and say the Prophet's name and pray Durood on the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam countless times, and it was spending time gaining the pleasure of Allah. And when you start to think about things like that, and knowing that you got to spend your youth in that environment and you got to gain so much from it, it implements something greater. And so many times over the past couple of years, I felt like my faith is shaking in so many different aspects, whether it's not getting the job that I wanted, or not passing some exams, or things like that. But it's always come back down to things happen for a reason. And a couple of months ago now, actually, it was last year this time, I was sitting some exams, and if I passed, I would have become a senior reporter. And I really wanted to pass because I didn't like my job, and I just felt like I was really stuck, but I couldn't get out of it until I passed these exams. And I was already praying to Hijab, and I was already praying Quran, and I was making so much dua that I just want to pass these exams and move on. And I passed one of the exams, but I didn't pass the other. And I cried so much. And I just thought, I prayed to Hajjud every day. I prayed so much Quran. I did this, I did this, I did this. And it didn't happen. I didn't get what I wanted. So July came around, and I resat that one exam, and I passed. But I didn't just pass the exam. I passed the exam. I got nominated for as a finalist for the Young Asian Journalist of the Year at the Asian Media Awards. I got a brand new job. I got the chance to move to London, and within two months of that, I moved to London, and I couldn't believe it. And when they say that good things take time, it truly is that, because I could have said at that point when I didn't pass the first time that I'm not going to pray to Hajjud. I'm just going to give up, because what's the point? I've been praying for so long and I haven't got what I wanted. But when all of that stuff happened all in one go, I just thought, subhanallah, like this was the way it was supposed to be. Because I could have passed my exam at that point and got stuck in this job even longer. There would have been no way out. But I passed my exams. I got a week's worth of work experience, got nominated for an award, had a lovely holiday, and then I got a new job, and I got to move, and I got to live my dream. But that came with knowing that something bigger was coming and I had to wait it out. And I had a meeting with my mentor and I said to her, I feel like I'm on the precipice of something really big, but I just don't know what that big thing is. And then, subhanAllah, like all of this happened. And alhamdulillah, I'm so grateful that I get to be in this position and I get to share my story. But I also kind of want to tell people that just because you've been praying and it doesn't happen, doesn't mean that it's the end of the line and it's never going to happen for you. It just takes time and you've got to keep going. You've got to have patience. And when I reflect on that moment, when I got those results, sometimes I think I didn't handle that well at all, like not in the slightest. I should have done better. But I guess you learn. And the next time that something like that befalls me, I want to take it on and do better. I want to have sabr in that first moment and say that, it's God's will and something better will come my way. And I've started like saying to myself, like even if something happens, like something really small, like I miss my tube, they say la'allahu khair, because you never know that I could have gotten that train and something could have happened on that tube. Like there's something better and there's something that you've got to understand that Allah knows best. And you've got to have faith in that.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's really important to talk about this as well. Like you said, we think, okay, I've been making dua, I've been praying, I've done like I've ticked all the boxes now. Basically, the logical result is I'm getting what I'm praying for, but it's not like that.
No, not at all. And I think we need to understand that doing the praying and ticking the boxes and trying to be this better version of yourself isn't just for a short period of time. It's not that I've been doing it for a month or a week or 2 years. It's that what am I gaining from this that's not linked to this world? It's that you wake up 5 minutes before Fajr and you pray 2 rakats to Hijab, but those 2 rakats every single day, I mean, you might not get anything that you pray for in this world, but it adds up for the day of Qiyamah when all of this is going to make sense and you're going to get your reward. And I think it's important that we look, because as Muslims, we don't live for this world. We live for the hereafter, and we get some success in this world and we can enjoy ourselves in this world and we can have fun, but we can stay on our paths. But we know that in the end, that none of this matters. We just need to make sure that we strive in the path of Allah and we do enough good that we get Jannah.
Yeah, inshallah, inshallah. It's the thing is sometimes what we ask for, it's just not destined for us. Or it might, like in your case, it's going to happen in a better form at a later date. And sometimes we get like the dua is accepted, but in another form, not what we ask for, but we are getting it. Like we are getting blessings upon blessings upon blessings daily, not to say hourly, not to say every minute, like the air we breathe in and out. This is a blessing. We don't even ask for it. There are people who are sick and they can't do that on their own. Subhanallah. So if we had to, like, if someone is so sick that they can't get the air in and out, one of their main dua would be, please, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, please help me breathe. We are doing that, like we are getting the answer to this dua without asking for it. We do that all the time, all the time. So this might be, we are asking for something else, and we are getting this, subhanallah, like the safety we are living in and the health we are enjoying and everything that we are enjoying, and even the bad things that could happen to us but didn't happen to us. It could be also a dua. You've been making dua for something, but the response to this dua is you didn't get hit by this car, or whatever, or your purse didn't get stolen. You forgot it, but then someone brought it back to you, or things like that. Like, we always look at the positive that's happening to us, oblivious of all the bad stuff that could be happening to us. And it's just because our dua prevented this to happen to us. but we're not aware of that, subhanallah. So there's so much to say about dua, and I would tell anyone who's been struggling, they are making dua, and they ask at some point, okay, my dua is not getting answered, what's the point? Like even making dua. I would just advise you to go and listen to some deep talks about dua, and also remind ourselves of the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and his beautiful names and everything that he is. And when we believe in that, we become more patient as well. I hope this all serves as a reminder for myself, and if anyone is listening, that they also benefit from that. But I feel like your story is a great example of what can happen if one is patient, and we should never give up on asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's always a wisdom when we don't get something that we've been asking for a very long time. And a very long time, it's all relative. Someone who's young, they're in their 20s, and they might have made dua for something for a few months or a year or maybe a couple of years. And it seems like, oh, I've been making dua for ages. There are people, when you get older and older and you've been making dua for a decade or two, then it gets even, it puts things in perspective. So it is possible to make dua for something, and after a decade or two, you didn't get that. And does it mean that you have to give up? No. So, inshallah. But like you said, the reward is also in the afterlife, inshallah. Are there any misconception or limiting belief that were holding you back at some point, and how did you overcome them?
I think in so many different ways, I've had over the years so many different sets of beliefs that have held me back. But when I wanted to go into journalism, I knew it was going to be a big choice to make, or a big decision, because for everybody that knew me for a long time, I was saying, I'm going to be famous somehow. People are going to know who I am. I'm going to move to London. I'm going to move to New York. These are things that I'm going to do. And it felt silly saying all of these things because I came from a really small town, and the chances of something like that happening was so slim. But I kept saying these things. But then when it came to pick a career, what do you want to do at university? And I didn't know what I wanted to do, because I did want to do journalism, but I didn't see representation in journalism. And I just thought, I'm not confident enough. I'm not brave enough to do that. I feel like I don't know anything, because in my head, everybody on my course was so well spoken. They understood the world, and I felt like I was living in some airy fairy world that didn't even exist. So I went in, and I remember there was so much apprehension in the way of like applying for it and going for the interview. And I think sometimes I just think, oh, maybe I was a tick box, that they let me onto the course because they didn't have a hijabi. And I was in that course, but I learned so much more than just being a journalist. I learned how important it was for me to be in that room and for me to possibly go on and have this career. And I was the person that was in my own way, because every time like I couldn't do something, or like technology failed me, or I didn't want to go and awkwardly interview somebody in the corner of a room, I kept saying, Haleema, how are you going to be a journalist, or how are you going to do this if you're not even going to let yourself try? Like, you could, if you just give yourself time and set up your camera properly, you could get the best interview. Just give it time. Just stop overthinking it and just get on with it. And every point I've been my own limitation. I've said no before I even thought about doing something, and it took me a couple of months to get my podcast off the ground, because every time I recorded it, I was just like, no, nobody's going to listen to this, Haleema. There's no point. Who cares? Like, you're a nobody. It doesn't matter. And I just told one of my friends, I said, I think I'm going to do a podcast, and I'm telling you this. And the only reason I'm telling you this is because now you know about it. And if you know about it, then you can hold me accountable and say, where's the podcast? Because otherwise, if it was left to me, I'm not a perfectionist, but I'm just so scared of the outcome of everything that I stop myself from even trying. And once I told her about the podcast, she kept saying, Haleema, where's the podcast? Where's the podcast? And I said, it's coming. So finally I released the first episode of the podcast. Now, alhamdulillah, we've got over 20 episodes and we're on the second season. So I've got to learn that I've got to give things a go without even thinking about all the possibilities of potential things that could go wrong or 10 years from now, because it's the now. Like, we've got to take it in, we've got to do what we think is worthwhile and what we think is going to have an impact. And then if it doesn't go to plan, then at least you gave it a shot. But there's no point worrying about it and thinking, oh, but what about this and this and this, if you haven't actually put it into motion and said that it's something that you've done. Because now I can say that if, let's say, at the end of this season, I think, okay, that's the end of it, at least I gave it 2 seasons. And even if I say journalism isn't for me anymore, I still gave it a shot, and I worked hard and I tried my best. Not that it isn't, because I love journalism, and I think it's one of those careers that no matter, sometimes, like, if you have a job, your job is only in one place. If you work in a factory, you go to work on a morning and you do your job and you come home and you leave that factory work behind. But with journalism, you could be on a different continent and you'd still be a journalist. You still hold those values, those ethics. And if you come across a story, that story is yours to write and yours to share. So journalism is a job that crosses boundaries and continents and geographical barriers. But it's a part of me that I'm so excited about. And it's one part of me that I think is so interesting. It's the only thing that makes me exciting, being a journalist, but it's something that I'm really proud of. And alhamdulillah, I hope that, and no, I'm so grateful that I get to say that I'm a journalist, because we know what's going on in Palestine and we know how many journalists have been killed. And so the fact that I get to do my job and I'm not targeted or killed, or I don't face enemies every single day, it's powerful to know that the career that you're in is a dangerous career somewhere else, but you're able to do it here in safety.
So, as a journalist, how would you like your Islamic values to reflect on your work?
I think journalism and Islamic values, a lot of people listening to this will think journalists are so sleazy, they're so nosy, they kind of listen to one thing and then change it and put a different version of the story out. But I think when you put the two together, sometimes you can see that journalism is some of the greatest work out there, because you've got to have moral integrity, you've got to stand the high ground, you've got to be impartial, you've got to tell the story as it is. And in the end, you're a truth seeker. You go out and you try to find the true story. You get to grips of it, you go underground and you do the digging. And I think with Islam, I always look back, and when I write a story, and I think, where does my Muslim identity fit in with the story? Have I told the truth, or what I believe is the truth? Yes. Have I reflect what the person is saying in an accurate sense? Yes or no? And I think when I think about who I am and being a Muslim journalist, I've got to always think about, how do I portray my own people in these stories? Do I give them the negative? Do I put them in a negative way or a positive way? What is it that I'm gaining? Because sometimes we write stories and we can present them as salacious and gossipy. We can say that, oh, so and so did this or so and so did this, but to get to the true essence of the story, you've got to think about, what's the greater impact that I want the story to have, or this narrative that I'm sharing to have. And it can always go back to, I want it to be the truth, the most truthful. And the truth is such an important part of Islam. And I remember Sheikh Omar Suleiman saying in his recent podcast about giving false testimony or standing by something that's false. And it's so easy to do at times. And you don't even know you're doing it. You stand by one person's narrative. But with journalism, you get to be in charge of the digging and pulling out the information and holding other people to account. And I think that's really important and powerful, because at times it holds you accountable, that the information that I put in out there, people are going to share, people are going to retweet, or they're going to take something from that. So you've got to do your utmost to make sure that it's the most accurate and most authentic version of events. And yeah, Islam is so key in that as well, because you've got to think about, how, if we all know that if you start a sin and somebody else carries on that sin, and then somebody else carries on that sin, all that sin comes back to you as the originator. So when you put something out there, you've got to make sure that it's true, because you could be influencing so many people, but you don't even know the impact that you're having, positive and negative. So it's always good to be able to hold yourself to account and make sure that you're putting truth out there.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because if you put something out there that's not the truth, and then it's broadcasted as actually it's a lie that's been broadcasted, then it comes back to, like you said, the originator. So subhanallah. Unfortunately, journalism, it used to be a very noble profession, but I couldn't help but think it's like Islam and the Muslims. Islam is the perfect religion, but what Muslims did with it is another story. And journalism is everything that you said, how you described it. But unfortunately, a lot of journalists or so-called journalists have tarnished the reputation of journalism. So I also hope that with this, that's a new generation of truthful people like yourself who really hold themselves to high standards, bring back this beautiful image of journalism that we can get back to trusting when we read something or when we are listening to something, that we don't dismiss it and just say, oh my God, it's just a bunch of maybe not outright lies, but we know that they have changed the narrative to fit their interests. So subhanallah, it's not easy nowadays to do this job properly. So may Allah make it easy for you.
Ameen.
Inshallah. What about striving to become a woman of ihsan and excellence? What does it mean for you personally?
I think it's getting to that point, because I recently just shifted in my career. So I was working in writing, and then I moved to broadcast. So it's when we look at that term of excellence and how do we get there, in my career I'm a bit at a point where I don't know how the excellence can come. But spiritually, I'm working with the lead up to Ramadan. I'm just reading this book. I'll just show you it. It's Sheikh Omar Sullivan's. It's Allah Loves, and the first part of it is Ihsan. Allah loves excellence, and it's about going above and beyond. And when people talk about excellence, I always go back to this madrasa Appa, who we were once sat, and she said, whatever you do, do it to the highest degree, do it with excellence. And whether that's writing a book or doing a job or being a teacher, whatever it is, do it and focus and do it with excellence. And I think that's the only thing we can do. We can only give it our best and try our best. So right now I'm trying to, with Hijabi Culture, I'm trying to use my voice and my platform to share the stories of other Muslim women who are doing amazing things. But then in my career, I'm also trying to push myself in the newsroom to hopefully get to a point where my voice matters there, and I can help influence stories and the type of stories that we cover. And in life, I just aim to be, or try to be, the nicest person or the kindest person, or somebody who's always got time for other people, who's willing to go above and beyond. Because though it might exhaust me sometimes, or I might find it difficult, I think it's important to show up for people and for people to know that you're there for them, because the world is such a difficult place to be in. And if you can just be that piece of kindness or that little bit of kindness in somebody else's life, it's a way that I want to be remembered. I always want someone to know that if they're struggling or if they're having a hard time, then Haleema can be the person to help them out. And I just think that just being available to people and being able to help them is I find it one of the easiest ways to gain people's blessings and du'as, and it makes me feel like I've got a purpose. beyond myself, if I can impact other lives.
Mashallah, mashallah. Can you share with us some of your routines that you do on a regular basis to help you achieve this success that you have or being on top of your game?
I'd say one of my key routines, something that I've done for so many years now, is I always wake up early. Um, I always wake up. So since I was in year 11, year 7, even when I was doing madrasa at the same time as doing school, it was so high speed, and we just didn't have enough. If I woke up at 7 o'clock, I would not have any close to enough time to be doing all the stuff that I had to be doing, all the revision, all the ahead learning that I had to do. So I've always, 5 o'clock has been my happy time. 5 a.m. is my peaceful time. I love being able to wake up at 5 o'clock with purpose. Over the years, the purpose has changed. Sometimes it's to get a run in before the day has even started, about getting in those miles, meters, and kilometers. But some days it's about being awake and being able to journal, or waking up and praying tahajjud, praying a bar of Quran, praying my fajr, and then journaling. So it's that morning routine is so important for me because I hate being late. And sometimes, and I like that slow start. So even now, my work, sometimes I have a 6 o'clock start. So I don't mind waking up at 3:50 in the morning, because I know that if I get a nice, easy start to my day and I get to do all the things that I enjoy doing, then when it comes to 6 o'clock and I start at work, I'm already ahead of everybody else. And I know that I've had part of my day that's already been just for me and nobody else. And whether that was if I was praying and I managed to get my tahajjud and I got my Quran, or if I just got journaling, or if I had a good breakfast, or or I managed to get some exercise in at that point during the day, I just think, oh, well, Haleema's ahead of everybody else already because she's ticked off all these things. And if I come back from work at 8:30 in the evening, and at that point I'm exhausted, all I just want to do is eat, pray my Isha and get into bed, then at least I've done those things that are important to me and I managed to get them in when I had time.
Yeah, that's I think that's the best thing to do. I mean, like you said, you ticked all the important boxes in the morning, so that by the end of the day, if you're exhausted, then you don't have to push yourself and actually being a bit resentful, or not looking forward to it, just to do it, just to tick the box. Whereas in the morning, you're so excited, you do that with a fresh mind and all of your energy. You don't just give what's any leftover to your ibadah and what's important to you. So I'm also someone who promotes this this kind of routine, to try to wake up as early as possible, in the sense of, like you said, being ahead, having this me time, where I know nobody's going to disturb me. And whether it's 5, whether it's 4, or whether it's 6, 7, depending on your schedule, it's really a game changer, I think. So, mashallah. You touched a bit upon it, but I would really like you to tell us about your why, your purpose, and your vision.
Yeah, so I think my why is, sometimes I feel really privileged that I got to go to university and I got to do what I wanted to do. I got to study journalism, and I got to, even though everybody around me was kind of scared, because what do you do with a degree in journalism? Jobs in journalism are just so hard to get by. So everybody was excited but scared at the same time. So now that I'm in this profession and I managed to graduate and I got this job, I just feel so privileged that I'm in this position, that I've managed to secure a job, I managed to stay in a job. And I just want to help other people. So I want to share their stories. And I feel so passionate about speaking to people, which is so weird because when I tell my friend that, oh, I spoke to this person or this person, she'll say, but you say you're an introvert, yet you do so many extroverted activities. And I laugh because I am such an introvert. But I always find that if I'm with my sisters, I'm an introvert. Like, they can do all the talking, they can socialize on my behalf, and I will happily just sit there quietly. But as soon as I'm left to my oh, I have to do something for myself. This other Haleema comes out and she's confident and she can talk to people and make random chit chat about things that she doesn't even know what she's talking about. So it's that thing about getting to know people and getting to share their stories. And I'm so passionate about sharing with people's stories, listening to them, what it is that makes them click, and then seeing how I can share their story. Because I just think when I'm in this position and I've got hijabi culture and I can write or I can use my podcast as a way to reach other people, I just think, why waste it when there's so many amazing people out there? And I think I've always studied people, whether that's looking at people walking whilst I'm having a mocha in a coffee shop or I'm just eating my lunch at work. I'm always looking at people, how they do things, why they do things a certain way. And I think it's really, I'm always interested to know about them. And if somebody's doing something or I really like somebody's outfit, I'm not going to say like, oh, like I'm not going to not tell them that I like the outfit, because you never know, they could tell you who the designer was or where you could get it from, and or maybe they made it themselves. And I just think it's so exciting to be able to reach out to people and connect. And I just love that human interaction. So yeah.
Yeah, mashallah. I can hear some of the things we have in common here. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having this conversation. So, mashallah. Who is your biggest inspiration?
Oh, I had when I saw this question, I thought about it a lot. Because with if you'd said this to me a couple of weeks ago, the answer would have been so different. There would have been some celebrity, I would have been somebody that I looked up to. But I've changed in the past 5 months. I've changed so much. And if anybody wants to kind of look into that, it's on my Instagram. But these past couple of months have changed me. And I'd say that my biggest inspiration are people like Mu'taz, Palestia, and Bizan, who are doing my job, but they're doing it in such a courageous way and in such an important way. They've changed the lives of millions of people. They've changed so many people's attitudes towards Palestine and what's going on there, because we were so uninformed, we were so uneducated, and they've gone above and beyond to show us what's happening on the ground. But they're people that I'll probably never meet. But my biggest aspirations in life are people I looked up to and people that I surround myself with, because if it wasn't for my sisters, I wouldn't be this version of me. I wouldn't be able to go out and say that I'm one of 4 sisters and all my sisters do amazing jobs and they're so confident and they're so Islamic and they know things. And I always know that if I'm struggling with something, I can always just go to them and ask them questions, whether that's if I get to pray qasr at this point or if this is this or anything, I can just always fall back on them. But also my family, my mom for dad for letting me do journalism and for standing by me when people thought it was weird, like, why is she doing journalism? She's not going to get a job. So yeah, I have a lot of aspirations and people and inspirations in life, my friends. But yeah, anybody who's willing to stand up and in a room where they might be the only person like themselves, or they're feeling isolated, but they still have that courage to speak out. I think I look up to people who have bravery in them, because it's so difficult, and courage, because they're qualities that are overlooked and they're only put to people on battlefields sometimes, or heroes. Because I'm listening to Sheikh Omar Suleiman's The First, and when he's talking about Khalid bin Walid and he's talking about all these big Sahabas, and their bravery and their courage comes from them being on the battlefield and them doing these things. But it's that there's one Sahaba who uses his bravery to go and save other Sahabas who were in prison. And I just thought, oh, well, that wasn't like on a battlefield, but he was courageous enough to put his hand up and say, I'll do that job. And yeah, those are the kind of people that I look up to, people who aren't scared and they're confident in what they do.
Mashallah. Mashallah. Is there a message or piece of advice you would like to give to the audience?
What I'd share is, don't be afraid of the consequences. I mean, that don't overthink things, because just do what you can in the moment, because life is so short in a sense, and the impact that you could have had in that short space of time could be huge, but you just need to give yourself the go ahead to do it. And I'd say believe in yourself, because once you start doing that, other people's voices don't matter anymore. And it's important that we listen to ourselves and our own inner self talk, and we make that a positive place. Um, it's just so important to know yourself and know how you sit in certain spaces, but that you are happy within yourself and you can make those choices based on what you're doing and where you are, because it can be so listening to other people's chatter and how you fit into a group of people, and just life is so chaotic at times, and you always think that this person's this far ahead in life and this person's doing this and this person's doing this, but think about where you are and how happy you feel in the moment, because that's all that really matters. And it's not about whatever everybody else is doing or how far ahead they are, because you don't know the challenges they're overcoming. And as long as you are true to yourself and you're happy in that moment, and you know that you've got a roof over your head, but you've also got these amazing moments that only you get to see, then everything's going to be okay. But that only happens if you believe in yourself and you give yourself that shot to pursue it, whatever it is that you want to do.
Amazing. Thank you for that. Thank you. Now, sometimes for anyone who's listening and might think, yeah, I want to do that, but I don't know how. So what would you tell them?
I personally, I journal a lot. I sometimes, like yesterday, I took a little solo trip, and I was sat in Waterstones, and I was reading a book, and I just thought, and just these words started coming to me, and I just started thinking about something, and I just got a brand new pen, and I didn't have for the first time in me. I knew I packed a writing book. I just couldn't find it in my bag, so I pulled out a receipt that I bought the book with, and I just started writing in the back of the receipt, and it was just a little a couple of bullet points about how I feel in this moment, or how does it feel that I'm doing this solo trip. Because leading up to it, I was a bit shaken. I was thinking, what, Haleema, you already spend so much time by yourself, having moved to London. You spend 24 hours a day with yourself, you eat every meal by yourself, your work commute is by yourself, you do all this by yourself. So why is it that you've chosen to go to a different city all by yourself, to eat by yourself, and why are you doing this? But I just thought that journaling just brought that out of me, that it's because I'm happy with myself and I enjoy my own company, and I like that I can do things on my own accord. So I can, if I don't like a certain museum, I don't have to go to that museum. I can skip and I can do something else. Or if I get really excited about some architecture, I can spend time looking at it, taking all the pictures, reading about it. And I think it's just that it's a different way. People unlock things in different ways, but writing has always been my way forward. Or whether I usually write by hand, but I also type. My notes section on my phone. Before this, I was just reading my notes section. I'm just thinking, what on earth, Haleema? Like, there's just so much in there. But I think reading and sometimes just reflecting on characters that you like. I always think that if there's a certain book that I'm reading and there's a character that I like, why do I like that character? What is it about them that's pulled me in? And then if it's a positive thing, then maybe I can take that on. So I gain inspiration for these things from so many different aspects, but I spend a lot of time thinking, not overthinking, but just thinking about me and what it is about myself that I want to change, or what it is that I like. And yeah, I just write a lot.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm glad I asked that question. So there you go. If you don't know where to start, you can start by journaling. And one of the things that stood out for me is when you said, I'm happy with myself. And I think it is so, so critical that at the end of the day, we are going to spend a lot of time by ourselves. Like when we are alone with just ourselves. And subhanAllah, Allah is always with us. But being by ourselves, there's so many people who can't do that, who feel anxious. And that's why they are listening to music, or they're playing games, or watching, or always have a device in their hands, and they are not able to stop and listen to their thoughts. I really think one of the most important thing to be able to achieve in this life is to be at peace when we are alone, like being able to spend time on our own and being happy with that, not starting to feel anxious or fearful or sad or I don't know, just not feeling at ease when you are alone with yourself. Subhanallah, so many people suffer from that anxiety and whatnot. So may Allah protect us. May Allah preserve you so that you're always happy when you are alone with yourself.
I
I
mean,
think, but it's such an important topic as well. So we've talked about mindfulness in previous episodes, but I think this is also a topic that can be addressed. You know, all the mental health and all that's related to that. So, mashallah, we are coming to the end of the episode, but before I let you go, I would like to ask you, like everybody else, is there someone you would like to see on this podcast, and what would you like to ask her?
oh,
Maybe some of your previous guests on your podcast. I don't know.
I know.
I'm not going to make it difficult for you.
um, I won't say somebody from my somebody that I've interviewed that I think you do a really good job with is Zainab Kidwin. She works for Rolls-Royce and she works for the diversity and inclusion part. She's part of the Muslim Engagement Network for Rolls-Royce. And I think the way she spoke, she got across so many important parts, but she was just such a go-getter. And I'd love to ask her about how she reached her level of excellence and how her background and because she's international. She was born, she lived in Saudi Arabia. I think she was Canadian, and then she moved to the UK. So she's got a lot of a very rich background. But how that influenced her to become the person that she is today, and she does it so well as well. So I'd love to know more about her.
Great. You can share the details with me
I
after
will do,
that,
inshallah.
and I will try to reach out. Or you can make the introduction. That's always the best way.
Yeah.
You make the introduction, and that goes quicker. So inshallah, I'm really excited to get to know more about her, inshallah. Finally, how can people follow you on social media, find out more about you?
Yeah, so you can follow me on Instagram at Hijabi Culture _. That's all Hijabi Culture related stuff. And then if social media is not your thing, but you want to listen to the podcast, it's Hijabi Culture, and it's available on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Amazon Music, and YouTube. So yeah, you can listen. We've got over 20 episodes, and we're on season 2 now as well. So if you know somebody who you think would be really good for the podcast, then please do share. But those are my main outreach. That's my main
Amazing.
outreach.
Great, great. I will share all of this in the episode description, inshallah. So thanks again for making the time today. Everyone listening, please, if you liked the episode, show it, like and share and subscribe. Leave a comment, send me questions. You know how to reach out to Haleema as well. And I hope to see you in the next episode. Haleema, thanks again. Salam alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome.